Good evening and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live on KSHP Radio, 1400 AM, on your AM dial, 1400 AM, and simultaneously on YouTube at Fired Up with Bob Irwin. So you have a radio version and you have at the same time a YouTube version. If you missed anything, you can go back and pick it up on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, Fired Up with Bob Irwin, you will find our shows going back 4 or 5 years at this point. First reminder, on the radio program, we are switching times to avoid preemptions for hockey games and things. Starting this week, this show is running at 5 p.m. drive time as normal. It is also running as a repeat on Friday at 9 p.m. Tomorrow night, it will play again. If you want to hear it or miss something, you can listen in at 9 p.m. on Friday, same station. And from now on, the only broadcast will be on Friday at 9 p.m. This week, there'll be two, the live show and then a recorded version. So we can actually hear the show when we're sitting home doing whatever we do sitting home. Hey, tonight my guest is local attorney, gun attorney, Don Green. Lot of gun law stuff tonight, as everybody's aware of all the problems we're having. Don, welcome to the show again.
Okay.
A little bit of your background, if you would, for new listeners.
Yes. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you, Bob, and your fine staff. And of course, this is being your 5th or 6th year, or at least longer than that I've known you to be on this show. Anyway, my name is Don Green. I'm a licensed attorney in California and Nevada. Last week, I celebrated my 33rd year practicing law. Focus of our practice has to do with criminal offense, and a lot of it is with guns, gun rights, administrative procedures involving guns, FBI denials, and now we've been just inundated with questions, in a good sense, inundated with questions and actually some legal points, which we'll discuss later, concerning the impact or lack of impact of Nevada's new background check law.
Yeah, I know if you listen to last week's show, I said hopefully we'll have some answers. Actually, you will see in a bit, we only have actually more questions. Well, some answers that cause more questions. Normally, if you want to talk to us, we can't do call-ins at the moment because of the way the radio and the TV show are set up. But if you have a question or comment, you can send it to bob@firedupmail.com. It's on one of these signs out here in front. And we answer all the emails that come in. Yes. If you want to email Don something, you can send it to there and I will forward it. Yes. Or you can look on our website for Don Green Attorney. We list our attorneys on our website, and yes, you'll find his direct contact information there. Hopefully it's only for an inquiry and not because you're calling from the jail. We're trying to prevent people from making mistakes, and usually, well, there's always lots of new people that don't know what mistakes they shouldn't make. Anyway, we're going to start out with a couple of defensive firearm use stories and then go into all the legal mumbo jumbo that's going on. We use cases that are from all across the United States, even occasionally from Canada, to show what happened in a particular self-defense or tried self-defense case, gun accident, whatever it may be, to show, get listeners to understand what the guy did right, what he did wrong, and how to make it better. We are not giving advice if you are a listener in Alabama that does anything to do with Alabama law or New York law. We are giving general advice to shooters everywhere. Obviously, if you're in trouble over a gun, you need to contact a local attorney who knows the nuances in that state. So that being said, our little disclaimer, this is a story out of Tifton, Georgia, from the Tifton Gazette. This is back on the 21st, just before Christmas. A local woman was leaving a local CrossFit back on December 12th. Now, the story was run on December 22nd. or 21st, when she saw a thief going through the belongings in her car. With the 40-year-old male suspect rummaging through her vehicle, the intended victim, a lady, she was armed, carrying a .45. She pulled her firearm and fired a warning shot. Apparently, it was fired over his head or up in the air. He surrendered, and then she held the thief at gunpoint until police arrived. Good so far. He was placed in police custody and taken to the county jail. A little bit of history here. Defending her actions. It would seem that firing the warning shot is out of line, and technically, legally, I suppose it was. But there was some recent history in the area. 5 vehicles were burglarized in the previous 2 weeks in Tifton, which is a relatively small town. Values and money and valuables and money were taken out almost each time. December 11th, this would be a week ahead of the event, or a few days ahead of the event. A passenger side window was busted out and GPS was stolen. Another one on December 12th, an unlocked vehicle was burglarized and pain pills and cash were taken. There was no sign of forced entry. In a third incident on the 13th, an iPad and some cash was taken out of the vehicle, $7. 2 previous unlocked vehicles were burglarized also on December 13th, December 14th and 15th, and $100 cash taken from a purse in a vehicle. All of this stuff is going on. We have this rash of vehicle burglaries. The woman came out, saw the guy in her vehicle taking stuff, and fired a gun and then held him at gunpoint. No, it wasn't a wise idea for her to fire a warning shot. Every bullet fired lands somewhere, but I wanted to put that in the story so you'd understand that this small town, now she finally had the guy that was apparently doing them all, and I believe police have connected into all of them now. The shot in the air was benign. It didn't hit anything. That's fortunate. Had a bullet hit something, of course, she would be a tremendous liability. She held the suspect at gunpoint. That's fine, as long as you keep your distance so he can't jump on you. And if he runs, don't shoot him. It's a valid citizen's arrest by any state law. She sees the thief in the middle of a crime and asks him to stay there. And he did. So the only question here was the warning shot was risky. Hopefully she won't be charged with that in Georgia. I think the locals will put up with that and simply not file a case on her. But we'd really rather see this done without the warning shot going off.
That's correct. And Bob, we see these incidents quite frequently, in particular as to Nevada and California. Let's play the devil's advocate. The woman was wrong. But the first and primary issue is, was there a direct, immediate threat of death or great bodily harm? Answer, no. Was she doing it to protect property? Answer, yes. Almost universally, if there's an alternative to protecting property which does not involve the use or threatened use of deadly force, which she did, that is the proper course to take. There wasn't anything by the auto burglar, which demonstrated that he was a direct threat to her personal safety. You're right in your comment that the best thing to do was holding the suspect at gunpoint was fine. Those are your comments. That was the thing to do. Firing the warning shot took this case from her being, a model citizen X to possible suspect and possibly arrested in the state of Nevada for that shooting.
And in many states, depending on the local law, she would be arrested. We have another story, I may get to it tonight, of a similar event where the person firing the warning shot actually was arrested. Again, what I said at the beginning of the show, local law matters. And, in this case, I looked at this, I understand why the woman's doing that. Yes. This guy is stealing everything that isn't nailed down, and it's all great. except the stop right there, I'm calling the police instead of firing the gun. That would do it. Reminder, next week, the radio show moves to Fridays at 9 p.m. It will also be this week, Friday at 9. You'll have a repeat of this show if you missed something. And next week, starting Friday at 9, we will be on the air again for the radio show, Friday 9 to 10. The Citizen Times, as part of the USA Network, reported in Candor, North Carolina. I want to say Chandler, but it's Candler, North Carolina, on 12/24, this is Christmas Eve. Authorities in Western North Carolina say a 21-year-old man was fatally shot while robbing a Mexican grocery store. The store employee fatally shot the armed robber. The Buncombe County Sheriff's Office says deputies found the suspect lying on the ground near the Tienda Mexicana in Candler about 8:30 p.m. A store employee had called 911. The bad guy from Asheville, North Carolina, was pronounced dead at the scene. The sheriff's office said the employee who called 911 told deputies that a robber brandished a gun and brandished a gun, and the two exchanged gunfire. The caller was not injured. He said the robbers came in wearing a ski mask and glasses. I presume dark glasses, or that wouldn't really matter in the description. At the same time, no other customers were in the store, which sells Mexican and South American food. I just threw this in because it's a great example of why you should practice with your gun. Perfect shooting. The criminal just picked the wrong place to rob. This seems to be a cut and dried case to me. When the crime took, the guy comes in with a mask and a firearm. Shooting in self-defense was a clear and correct choice. The reason I put it in here, because practicing with your firearm is what won the day. Shots were exchanged. The bad guy fired at him too. This is where practice works. There isn't time to fumble around with your holster or your firearm safety that you haven't practiced taking off, so forth and so on. This is a real confrontation that took place in a split second. And the guy who can make this smooth, well-practiced draw stroke and engage with a hit center mass wins every time. This is a practice. This is where you don't want to discover the gun won't come out of your holster, your seatbelt, if you're in your car, blocks the draw, whatever is going on. This guy had practiced, and it clearly saved his life.
Yes, Bob, this is an excellent example under Nevada law and California law, and I know that your staff teaches this almost every single CCW class, weekly for the past several years. Notice that the shopkeeper returned the fire, calls 911, stays in place, does not disturb the scene, does not embellish what he did, according to the reports now. And he's not charged, but he did not do anything to disturb the active crime or the active shooting scene for the purposes of forensic determination. Now, ideally, every lawyer, people that come to me, they're not always going to have this perfect of a scenario. But for your fans, your viewers, your listeners, this is a real good example of things that people have to keep in mind when they're continuing in their training, not only just for their CCW, but also in further training. And as you said, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, the guy came in shooting. Had this guy not been prepared by practicing, he probably, with this story, would be a little different. Mexican store owner shot dead by a robber who escaped, and we don't know who he was. This is good. The aforementioned concealed carry permit class, we teach that here at the gun store every Monday, every Wednesday, and every Saturday. You can find the classes on our website and actually sign up there if you wish, thegunstorelasvegas.com. And we will get you in the class and get you educated as to what you can and cannot do under Nevada law, and a little brief of what's generally acceptable in other states. But again, we're in a mess here with state laws that are changing rapidly. Speaking of changing rapidly, We're going to get off the shootings for just a bit and start talking about the Nevada Universal Background Check Law, which sort of took effect January 1st. It mandates the referendum that was signed and won by 0.04% or something, that the FBI conduct all background checks for personal transfer of firearms in Nevada. And of course, as most of us know, the FBI came back on December 14th and said, no, we're not going to do that. So Nevada passed a referendum which has the force of law, January 1, that ordered the FBI to do background checks for everybody. We just call up the FBI and go, check out this guy, Don Green. The FBI doesn't really take orders from the voters of Nevada or from the Nevada legislature. So we can't actually do that. Now the law is in effect. So the Attorney General, Laxalt, wrote an opinion that because we can't actually call NICS direct, that the background check law is not enforceable because the law says we have to do something that we can't do. If you call the FBI and ask them to check the background of somebody you're giving a gun to, they will tell you no. So they're not doing that. So being as we can't do that, the Attorney General says this statute can't be enforced. However, understanding the background check and how it got there, a referendum is binding. Attorneys tell me that our state law says a referendum of the voters becomes law on the date it becomes law, and that's it. And the legislature nor anybody else can change it for 3 years. So we have the law in the books. We have the Attorney General in Nevada saying we can't enforce that, but that's an opinion. It's what we call an affirmative defense, I guess, in the world of law, where if you're charged with a crime of not doing a background check, your defense is, I did do it, but I did it for good reason because the FBI won't do it. So theoretically, we're violating the law now when we do background checks in our store because we're not calling NICS, and it says we will, and it says you will too. So until we get that straightened out, which we haven't, right now we're doing the background checks on the old system by calling the state criminal history repository, which our Attorney General, Adam Laxalt, said that's what we should do. So we're doing that, but it still violates the law. It violates, we're violating one law or the other. Now, on top of that, because the Nevada Sales Tax Department gets a piece of this also, the referendum said that we as dealers will do background checks and all citizens will do background checks. The ATF came in and said to dealers with a memorandum they sent out that when this happens, two people come in and want to trade guns, one's selling the gun to the other one, we will take the gun and log it into our acquisition and disposition book, our in and out book of guns we own. Then we will do the background check that we can't do on the new guy. And then if he passes, transfer him the gun. In steps the Nevada Sales Tax Department, which says because the gun is coming from our books, the ATF says it goes into our books. The referendum said it didn't, but the ATF says it does. So we have the gun in our books. Now we give it to the new guy, and sales tax law says we will charge sales tax on that.
Yes, you should charge the sales tax. That is correct.
Now, well, the customers don't think that's correct,
That's true.
but the law says it's correct. What about private party sales that aren't from dealers. Nevada sales tax says if you are a gun show guy, an occasional seller, you're a hobbyist, you know, you go to the gun show, you sell, talk to your friends, and you sell one gun a year, that is a taxable sale also. Now, a local attorney looking at that as an intrusion has filed a lawsuit now against the state of Nevada to unenforce that part of the regulation, if I understand, Don. So, you know who this attorney is?
Yes,
It's him.
it's me, Don Green.
And he's going to, this gets so complicated, but his clients who are not dealers, but hobbyists are caught in a different trap than dealers are caught.
Yes.
Here, charge.
Here's the Reader's Digest version. Under the statute, Nevada Revised Statute 202.254 states that the seller and the buyer shall appear before the licensed person, the federal firearms licensee, we'll call it the FFL, the gun store, shall bring the weapon. The federal firearms licensee shall take the weapon during the initial part of the sale, run the background check on the buyer. Now, the statute also allows the seller, the FFL, to give the firearm back to the seller. The seller can leave, can go to Walmart, can go to the store, but he's got to come back with the weapon at the close of the deal. The statute also says in Nevada Revised Statute 202.254 that the licensee shall take all steps as if the weapon enters his or her or its inventory.
Yes.
Requiring the placement in the in and out log for the FFL, any other regulations for the county and the state. If we look at chapter 372 of the Nevada Revised Statutes, which governs those persons who are required to collect and pay into the state coffers a sales tax. This event, my client believes, creates a tax. This event is a taxable event created as an unintended but direct consequence of this new statute.
Of the referendum. Yeah.
The referendum, and the statute is silent on that issue. Now, when it's silent on the issue, if my client takes his buyer to a federal firearms licensee, and the federal firearms licensee charges his fee and the $25 background check, if that's going to be enforced.
Yeah.
What happens when the federal firearms licensee says, oh, by the way, for this Smith & Wesson Model 29, for which you just purchased for $1,200, I need sales tax at 8.5 or 8.75%.
Yep.
The buyer is going to look at the seller and say, what sales tax? Show me where it says in the statute, and it doesn't. But what happens when, and this is not an occasional sale for the federal firearms licensee, because the sale and trading of firearms is within his, her, or its own ordinary course of business.
Yes.
Now, if I brought in a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, pristine vehicle, and I asked Bob at the gun store, listen, I'm going to California. I'd like you to sell this vehicle for me. Bob will say, yeah, I'm sure I can find somebody. That is an occasional sale because you're not in the business of selling classic cars,
right,
but you are in the business of selling, trading firearms. So the statute under and Nevada Revised Statute 372 is quite clear, but it's absolutely silent on that issue in the new referendum, the new Nevada background check law. My client says, We want the court to declare that that law is unconstitutional because it is void for vagueness based on the Nevada Constitution, the Nevada Revised Statutes, and the Due Process Clause of the Nevada Constitution. The lawsuit, which I filed last Thursday, and an amended complaint was filed last night at about 8:41 p.m. on January 4th. We never once ever mentioned the Second Amendment. We want to keep this case
It's a tax
as a Nevada tax and Nevada issue only, not as a generalized Second Amendment issue, to be litigated because of the convoluted nature of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, at the gun shows now, if you buy a firearm from a private seller, you still have to get a background check. All the gun shows here require, if you get a gun that you didn't bring in, then you have to get a background check from a dealer, which right now the state charges $25 and the dealers charge a few dollars extra on that for their time, because the $25 they don't get to keep, that goes to the state. So the guy sitting at the table doing the background check is going to charge you for his time to do those, obviously. But so right now, the way we have run this, you buy a gun from a private party. Okay, so you go to the police guy or the dealer and you get the background check and then you leave. But now, what everybody forgot was enters Nevada sales tax and says,
Yes.
If you're there, we have a record of the transaction. This isn't like two neighbors trading a lawn chair for 20 bucks in their pocket. Because of the background check, there's a record of the sale. So it's taxable.
Yes.
And, I understand, when you have a garage sale and you're selling your stuff, everybody understands theoretically those sales are taxable. Now, Nevada sales tax doesn't chase people around to collect that unless they're having a giant garage sale every week for the next 15 weeks. And they know it because the neighbors complain. So they're operating a business. So then sales tax gets involved in business license and all the other licensing stuff. Now this guy at the gun show is recording the sale A to B because the guy writing up the background checks is recording it. So where's the sales tax money?
That's precisely the point.
Exactly.
And that's why my client is uncertain of what his rights and obligations are under the statute. And that's why we filed the case for declaratory relief. Now, you and I have been discussing the sales tax issue for some time.
We knew this was coming. Yeah.
Well before the election, you and I discussed this.
Yep. It was coming, and the state of Nevada needs the money because of the schools, because of all this other stuff. And they always spend more money than they have in the legislature. And we've got Democrats in there now, so they're going to do it again. And I cannot imagine the current legislature with Democrats controlling both sides. Not that they're anti-gun, but they are pro-tax. And we know that. So to support the schools, to support whatever, they're not going to give up the sales tax on all these private party transactions. In fact, this is opening a whole can of worms for others besides the gun guys, because just because it's a gun, we know the sale took place because of the background check law. So they've got a whole rim of investigators can now come out and go, wait a minute, you owe sales tax. Da, 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 da. This is not a quick fix.
Unless the state says, through some kind of administrative regulation or opinion or some kind of a waiver or something, there is no tax, which they theoretically could do.
They can.
We don't know.
You want to bet my dollar against your 100 right now? The Nevada is going to turn down the sales tax money that the referendum causes them to get. It's look out, I want to, while we're on laws we can't answer, I promised you guys last week I'd have some clear answers, and all I've got really is more questions. And hopefully the legislature meets February 2nd, I believe they start. And, if they even hear any of this stuff, we may have clarity. I also want to run a little bit more on Sheriff Lombardo. Sheriff Lombardo, there was an article in the Las Vegas Sun now 3 weeks ago, I think, about him advocating that there should be no high-capacity magazines, anything over 10 rounds or 15 rounds, whatever. Didn't mention the magazine size. And he was for that, and it's caused a lot of flack and a lot of people to write petitions to recall the sheriff and all that stuff. That story is fake news.
Yes.
The sheriff said in an interview with the Las Vegas Sun, he should have known better. Lombardo was a Republican. He is pro-gun. He made a flippant remark. I know those can get you in trouble because they get me in trouble all the time, that nobody needs a 100-round magazine to defend their house. He was joking. That was picked up, that he was advocating that the cops shouldn't have magazines over 10 rounds and that tourists and all this. He never said any of that crap. My friend Don Turner of the Nevada Firearms Coalition got the same exact answer when he, his lobbyist interviewed Metro's lobbyist at the legislature right after that. The legislative guy for Metro said, "We're not proposing any law like that. There is no such law." And I checked, and there is no bill draft for that. If there was one, it isn't being supported by the Clark County Sheriff. There may be one now after all this crap, but it ain't Lombardo. As a gun owner, he's on our side. Leave him alone. Duh. That's the third time I've said that on this show.
Good.
And he's still getting recalls that he's anti-gun, and he is not.
That was at the last gun show just a few weeks ago before Christmas. That was on everybody's lips.
Yep. And these guys that are walking around with a petition saying, let's recall Lombardo because he's against standard capacity magazines, they're wrong. That's it. They're wrong. He didn't say that with any intent. Should know better than to talk to the Las Vegas Sun. Sheriff, that's where your mistake was made. Anyway, I personally talked to him. This is crap. This story is about him. Anyway, we do have concealed carry permit classes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. You can find them on our website, thegunstorelasvegas.com. If you just have a gun in your home, you don't intend to get a permit, the class is absolutely free. It's good for people to learn about gun safety and how guns work and so forth and so on. If you have a gun, you should take the class. There's no cost at all. If you want to get a permit, then we charge $10 to do the paperwork. You have to take down to the sheriff. Currently, the sheriff charges $97 or something for the permit. They're taking about 100 days, give or take, to actually issue it. So if you want to have one for summertime, you need to get in the class now. We do charge for the ammunition to qualify with, and that's the fault of my bookkeeper. A couple of years ago, my bean counter came to me. We were giving the class and then the free ammunition. And he said, Bob, do you realize you spent $210,000 last year giving away qualification ammunition? You need to stop doing that. So you got to pay for your own ammo. Got to use ours, lead-free range, all that stuff.
Bob,
yes.
may I ask a question while you're on the subject of CCW?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is from several people at the last gun show.
Okay.
What is the earliest date that someone should come in for renewal for their CCW?
The earliest date is 2 months or 3 months ahead of your expiration date. If you come in more than 120 days ahead, they will simply redate the permit, but not extend it. So you have to be within that time window. The way it times out, there almost is always going to be a gap because it's taking them 4 months or 3.5 months to do the permit. but they don't want you to take the class more than 4 months ahead. So you got a little time window there where you could get left without a permit. You can't use the old one after it expires. And if you can get the new one in your hand, you don't have a permit. You can still have one in your car, as we know, and have one in your house. But if you don't get the timing exactly right, you're going to be without a permit.
Thank you.
Again, if you need to carry a gun, you need to defend yourself, defend yourself. We can go argue the permit law and the timing, and that makes it impossible to continue getting a permit. The sheriff's department is overwhelmed with permits and overwhelmed with crime and overwhelmed with about everything else. This is another good shooting. I like it. This is KABC TV Channel 7 reporting. That's in LA, Channel 7. Everybody's familiar with ABC in California, Los Angeles. In Long Beach, on the 2nd, that was the early morning after New Year's night, or New Year's Day. The Long Beach Police Department called a report of a shooting in the 200 block of Artesia Boulevard at 5:16 a.m. on Monday. They found a man who had been shot in the body. The Long Beach Fire Department brought the man to a local hospital where he died of his injuries. Investigators spoke to a resident of the scene that determined he had shot a burglary suspect. He had called police after the shooting, remained at the scene. After hours of questioning, the resident was released from custody. Neighbors described the apparent burglar as a homeless man who had been seen skateboarding in the area. Police are continuing to investigate. Now, this is California, where everything goes wrong. However, if you need to shoot in self-defense, they still have self-defense in California. Just don't muck it up by running away, lying about what happened to the officers. It'll work out. In this case, the guy stayed there, explained what happened to the officers, didn't lie to them about what happened. The blood spatter and everything lined up with what he said happened. They found other witnesses that knew the guy was a homeless guy who was always turning doorknobs and whatnot. He did it exactly right. You don't want to give the police, and I'm speaking as a defense guy here now, but
Yes.
You want to give the police the facts, not what you were thinking, just the facts. I live here, heard a crash, got up, there's a guy in my living room, he lunged toward me, I fired my gun, the gun's over there in the drawer, here's my ID, I'd like to talk to my attorney, Mr. Green, before I give any more details. That's it. Then you can't muck it up by being under so much stress. You just killed a guy. Are you thinking rationally? Of course not. You know, this is the most stressful time in your entire life. You're going to blank out. You're going to forget details. You're going to remember things out of sequence. This is why the police, when they have an officer-involved shooting, they don't let the guy talk to anybody for 48 hours. They know that. So don't give details. Particularly, don't give your motives as to why you fired. Give facts only. I live here.
Yes.
He don't. Crash in my living room. Lunge. Bang. Let's go talk to the attorneys before I tell you what happened.
Yes, and Bob, I made a note here that all of your students, all of your former students, all your students who plan on attending your classes, or anyone listening or viewing this YouTube who's planning on getting or taking a CCW class, it is extremely important to keep your course materials, because this example it states that the police detained and handcuffed this man for several hours of questioning.
Of course they did.
And you are going to be questioned. Before the police know everything which is going on, you're like a suspect. And that's why, as you said, I shot in self-defense. I feared for my life. He had a gun. It's right there. I'm not going to say anything else. The more you say, the more things can change.
Worse it is.
Don't change the situation, and keep those course materials, which you are provided in your classes, which you provide in your classes, or any other CCW class, and review those, because this incident occurred 72 hours ago. And that means that you've had one class yesterday where this is probably taught, and that's how timely these things happen. And I would bet $1 to a donut that this incident occurred in just milliseconds, if not seconds. And yet he's detained for hours, according to the news reports.
And they got to do that. I understand the police are going to do that. I've got another story about it happening to neighbors who showed up at a crime scene. The police have no idea who you are. They know they got a dead guy. There's a smoking gun. Are they going to handcuff you until they find out what's going on? Yes, that's what they do. You know you're the good guy. The arriving officers don't, right? Got to live in time to find out. Well, this is actually the story that I was going to bring up on that same issue. This is reported by AZ Central on 12/29/16 in Lavon, Arizona. According to detectives, a 19-year-old and a second man, as yet unknown, attempted to force their way into a home after making contact with the residents. As the force your way in was happening, the resident fired. His bullet killed the 19-year-old. A wounded accomplice fled in a white truck that police were able to trace to a hospital. The Phoenix police spokesman said several people reported to have fled the area following the shooting. This was at the 4100 block of South 62nd Lane, if you're listening in Arizona. Anyway, all of these guys will eventually be rounded up as the suspects, rat each other off. They always do. But this was the point of the story. A neighbor who lived a few doors down said that he and a second neighbor were arrested after walking outside to see what happened. He said, I guess we were just outside at the wrong time, adding that he and the second man were in police custody for about 30 minutes. The police were looking for a third intruder who was actually inside the house. There was a larger group, but only 3 of them actually entered the house. One wounded guy they got at the hospital. The one was dead at the scene, the 19-year-old. And they were looking for a third one. Now, police arrive, there's sirens, no, the 911 shooting, there's a dead guy maybe, da-da-da-da-da. Every officer in the neighborhood and several adjoining jurisdictions is flying into this crime scene. These 2 guys walk out into the edge of the crime scene, and guess what? Who are you? What? On the ground. And they hook them up. But I'm the neighbor. Well, that's what the bad guys always say. So, first you need to stay in your house. If the police are screaming in at that speed, there've got to be suspects running probably somewhere. Maybe you need to stay in your house for a few minutes longer and make sure. We did a case 2 weeks ago where some neighbors did this thing, and they found the guy hiding in one of the houses that the neighbor vacated to walk over to see what was going on. He walked back into his house after it's over and finds the suspect hiding in his closet. And we had a second shooting. The bad guys are running. Cover your own house. Stay, look out the window, see what's going on. After everything is all done and the bad guy hasn't run into your house, then you can come out and talk to your neighbor.
Yes.
When the police see you walking up from the adjoining house, they're still going to say, who are you? And if you happen to match the description of a guy that they saw flee, they may not know you came from the house 2 doors up the street. They're going to do on the ground, let me see your ID. Of course they are. Try to be understanding of the officer's viewpoint. They're at a hot scene. Cops are getting shot all across the country. We all know that. Their lives are in jeopardy. If you wander into a crime scene, you can expect to be handcuffed. Treat it as a great story to tell your grandchildren. Be nice to the officers. Their lives are on the line. They came flying into a crime scene where there's dead guys already, right? They're in danger, as we all know. So if you get handcuffed, be courteous. Understand it from their perspective. You know who the neighbors are. They have no idea.
And this can happen at any time. I defended a man a few years ago at the in Henderson at the intersection of Green Valley Parkway and Horizon Ridge in the vicinity of Walgreens, who happened to be in a dark colored sedan. When the people from Walgreens ran out, they said the man was in a dark colored sedan. Henderson police come onto the scene. They see this guy. He comes out. He gets belligerent. Why are you arresting me? And for someone who was not a suspect, he gets arrested for resisting arrest for doing nothing except sitting in his car when he should have kept his mouth shut, got out of the car, and cooperated with the officers.
Yeah, you know, this happens all the time. And I've experienced it going, you know, to going to houses for this and that and the other thing, looking for people with warrants. And the neighbor will come up and go, "What are you looking for him for? He didn't do anything." How could you possibly know that? You know, I have a warrant for his arrest in my back pocket, but I'm not going to show you. You're not involved. Go back in your house.
Yes.
And then they will stand. It hadn't happened to me yet. When I tell them to go back in the house, they always have. But they, you know, they start screaming at the officer like he's the enemy. He's just doing his job. Give him a break. Now here we go. This story is all over the media, and it's just what not to do. A textbook what not to do case. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution and about every other media reported on New Year's Day, 1/1, at 2:30 a.m. You have the time frame. It's like New Year's morning after we're all out partying. 2:30 a.m. on Thursday on Highway 29 in Noonan. Three men walked into a Waffle House and sat down and ordered a meal. Varying reports. There's so much media coverage of this, so it's so different depending on whose report you read, but I've got a kind of conglomeration of what appears to be the more common threads. They sat there and ate. About 45 minutes later, one of them walked up to the counter as if he's going to pay for the meal and presented a note that said, "I'm going to shoot everybody in the place if you don't give me all the money." The robber was given $200, and the three men went out toward their car in the parking lot. A waitress followed the three men out. "I didn't know if they had guns," she said. "I didn't know if they're going to the deal to get another gun and could come back and try to get into the safe. So my instinct was to go to my car and get my gun." She basically follows them out, retrieves a 9mm from her car. Then she fired a shot into the woods over their heads. Various reports say fired a shot in the woods, fired a shot in the air, there's all sorts of descriptions. That's my compilation of the various reports. Apparently she fired in the woods, but well over their heads, according to Channel 2 Action News. She told reporters she was only trying to protect the store and her co-workers. As of this report, the waitress has been fired. Waffle House, a spokesman told Channel 2 they're aware of the situation, but cannot comment on personnel matters. Everything that Don said about the previous cases, threats to life, et cetera, everybody's safe. If they try to come back in, if she wanted to get her gun and scatter back into the restaurant in case they came back. Anyway, don't follow suspects outside.
Exactly.
They're rarely a threat to anybody when they're leaving. They got their money. They did their robbery. Are they really likely to come back into the restaurant again? Really unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible, but they're rarely a threat once they're out in the parking lot. Don't fire warning shots to speed their escape. You know what happens then sometimes is she says she fired it into the woods, not at them, but they don't know that. It's in the middle of the night. It's 2:30 a.m. They may think they're being shot at and then fire at her and claim self-defense. I realize it's a skinny claim when you're doing a robbery, but people get themselves shot firing warning shots at people who are already leaving because they fire back. Anyway, the woman lost her job. She has several children at home, a disabled husband who can't work, according to media reports. Considering the possible lawsuit for her actions, I think the Waffle House is better off not letting her go. And I made a note to myself to ask you this when we got the show on here. We're past the point where she shouldn't have gone out and fired her gun, and that was a dumb thing to do and whatever, but nobody was hurt. So she's okay. The bullet didn't hit anybody. The Waffle House, looking at the potential of a lawsuit because their agent fired at these people in the parking lot or put a round in the air in the parking lot. When they fire her, isn't that undercutting their own defense in the lawsuit? If there is a lawsuit, claiming they're showing they knew she was wrong, hence they were wrong because she was their agent. And I know firing a gun in the parking lot isn't in her job description.
Right.
So she's acting out of her job, but she's on the clock.
Right. Their defense to another action is going to be that this was what's known as a subsequent remedial measure, which was taken after something occurs, and you can't use that if it was to do something lawful and something which was legitimate and something to remedy a situation. It's sort of like repairing the sidewalk after somebody's fallen down. It's sort of like putting up a sign in Albertsons.
Repairing the sidewalk isn't an admission that that you're at fault.
It could be.
Okay.
But you're right. You point out 4 things. 1, she followed him out wrong from a defense standpoint in Nevada and California. She's going to be in jail. She retrieved her firearm from a car. That takes this case from fear of great bodily death or harm to bare fear. She fired a shot into the woods. We're not sure if it was from the Waffle House or outside. That could be a felony. And that despite her laudable efforts, there was no threat other than the note. There wasn't the brandishing of any weapon, from what we know from the reports.
Yeah. They apparently had a gun. There was a lot of, this thing is like 8 pages long. When you read all of this is every news media in Georgia carried this, and they all said something different, which is one of the things I make a rule on this show is when I find a story that seems like something I want to put on the air, I try to find other media. I do searches of the newspapers in the area, et cetera, radio and TV to see who else carried the story. And sometimes they all carry the same story. They just copy each other word for word. But oftentimes you'll have 2 or 3 stations, like we did in this case, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporters investigating and Channel 2 Action News investigating. And Channel 2 Action News does like a thing like the I-Team here. They go to all this stuff and actually interview everybody. And the difference between the two was just amazing in the details. So, but, the bottom line is the round didn't hit anybody. I understand that. I understand what she's doing. They've set up a website to help her with the bills and so forth because her husband's ill and he can't work and so on. But it's okay. You're right. You can fix the sidewalk after people fall. It's not admitting that it's your fault they fell. Okay. That's good. Okay, that's good. Boy, I don't know if I want to get into this one. We've got about 4 minutes. I'll get into this very briefly. The NRA ILA ran a story on the 23rd of December that the Social Security Administration has issued a version of their change in their rules that could affect a number of people on Social Security who have firearms. The basic idea for the Social Security Administration is they are saying that their rule says if a person is on disability because of mental health issues, they may not need to have a gun in their possession. You all remember that, and it's still going on, the VA taking guns away from veterans
Yes.
who were needed help with their balancing their checkbooks. And if they live in VA supported housing, then they fall under that. And we've had a lot of hassles. Hopefully that's going to be changed. This is basically a mirror image from the Social Security Administration. The NRA is jumping all over it. There's way more to this than the story. First off, it is a bad thing. If the Social Security Administration is going to try and restrict firearms because you're on Social Security and are on Social Security for mental issues, should they investigate that? Yeah. Yeah. Should they take your gun away before they finish the investigation? No. This is a preemptive strike. They give you a way to get your gun back after you have a hearing. Anyway, the point of this, the effective date of this is December 19th of 2017. That's a year from now, guys. And we've got a new administration coming in. I don't think this thing is going to be a story at all. The program is really scary, but I expect the new Congress or the administration is going to stick this thing in the trash can where it belongs. Certainly someone who has mental health issues can already be investigated
Yes.
and looked at by everybody and his brother to see if there's something wrong with them. The Social Security Administration sifting through and finding people seems like a redundant waste of time and way out of jurisdiction for what they should do. And I think the whole thing will be killed by the new Congress anyway. So if you're on Social Security, don't worry about it, at least for a year. Gun show's coming up, Western Trails at the Orleans. We're going to be there this weekend, the 7th and 8th of January. Vinefield's got an antique show coming up at the Hilton. The last one was a disaster. Western Trails is again at the Eastside Cannery on Russell. At the same time, there's a Las Vegas gun show at the Sports Center. We will be at that one with our stuff. If you want to talk to us, January 22nd, 21st, 22nd. And we've got another great Las Vegas gun show. I haven't talked to them yet at Cashman Field on the 4th and 5th, and Crossroads on March 5th and 6th. In other words, there's between now and the beginning of March, there's 6 gun shows. We'll see you hopefully at Western Trails. If you want to talk to us at the Orleans, we'll be there the 7th and 8th, Saturday and Sunday.
Yes, this weekend.
Yeah. And you'll be there.
Well, we'll be there as well.
Yes. So you can get that convoluted story about the sales tax. And his plaintiff will be there too, I'm sure. We'll be back next week. We're going to be on the air next week, Friday at 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Still on YouTube. We'll simulcast that with our recording the show at 5. So we'll be on YouTube a little ahead of the radio broadcast. Anyway, we'll have firearms instructor Lenny Davis, who has a lot to add to this gun law stuff we're talking about. But the radio show next week. This week is a repeat of this show on Friday from 9 to 10. We can actually listen.
Sure.
When I got opportunity to listen to the show the other day, because I went home early and the show ran later, I discovered a problem with the radio. It's okay when we look at the tape because we know who's talking. We can't talk at the same time. We'll be back next week, Friday at 9, this week and next week and forever on 1400 AM and on YouTube. New show every Thursday. Tune us in. Thanks for listening. We'll have this gun law stuff straightened out by next week.
Thank you.